Alright, guys, so let's talk about the global economic war today. Now, at the heart of all this chaos is the big decoupling between China and the US financial system. Now, it's something that we have talked endlessly about since 2022. The moment the Biden administration confiscated the Russian reserves, it was game over. Maybe not for the majority of countries, but definitely for China. Now, there's no point hanging on to your stash of US assets, especially when all the economic and geopolitical moves from Washington are out to corner your country. No one wants to fund their own containment. Now, update in May saw the UK actually holding more US Treasury bonds than China at 779 billion versus 765 billion. And it's important to understand what this means. Beijing used to be the biggest holder of US debt, but that era is over. China is passing the hot potato down to the United Kingdom. Now, as the dollar continues to fall, this actually exposes holders like the British to wealth destruction. A lot of their bonds were bought when rates were well below 2% yield. And when the currency falls by 10%, suddenly your purchasing power collapses. Now, even if you were to liquidate your bond holdings, you can import less from the world in a pinch. Now, definitely a big problem when it comes to a financial crisis when you need to activate a bailout. Now, the trend here is extremely disturbing. Now, while China is slowly dumping their holdings since 2015, look who else is buying the shortfall. We have Japan still holding over $1 trillion worth, the UK is still holding more US bonds, while Canada and Belgium, they're increasing their holdings as well. Now, outside of this list, the Germans hold over 100 billion, while the French bumped their holdings up to $375 billion today. In other words, the G7 is subsidizing the US economy and, by extension, helping Trump fund his own trade war. The US financial system is being held up by money from their allies. And let's not forget that 30% of the entire US Treasury market belongs to foreign investors, including governments. Now, this is a financial nuclear button the world actually has as a bargaining chip, but still isn't using it yet. But we could come to a point in time where holding US debt just becomes unfeasible. Now, a big part of why the G7 still buys US bonds is because of the deficit. Now, in May, the US trade deficit actually increased by 18% versus the previous month, hitting $71 billion. US exports actually fell and they continue to import more stuff. But if Trump really makes good on his promise to snap back the deficit and isolate the US from global trade, the G7 will be in a world of trouble. And if the currency continues to fall and the world moves away from dollar transactions, they will encounter a brutal dilemma. Now, they'll be stuck with a ton of greenbacks losing value while US exports will cost more. So it's a double whammy where they could pay more and get less. In other words, they slowly morph into US consumers themselves. This is why what China does is something everyone has to watch. Now, we keep hearing about the Chinese dumping US bonds, and indeed, their stash has reached a new low. Chinese holdings have reached 756 billion, and that's a far cry of over 1.2 trillion at one point in time. Where is the money going? Now, some of it is flowing into industries and to fund projects in BRICS. But when it comes to central bank assets, we best believe they are stacking more gold like never before. They have been buying almost non-stop for a year, and there's really no indication that Beijing will stop. Now, in fact, Chinese gold producers are now rushing to raise funds in Hong Kong. They are going to issue more IPOs that could exceed $2 billion, and the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund could also come in and provide the money. In fact, Chinese miners, they just bought $1 billion gold mine in Kazakhstan, and that one mine is going to produce over 5 tons of gold annually, which is obviously going to flow back to the mainland. And this is what happens when you have over $1 trillion worth of trade surplus. While the US has a spending crisis, China has an investing headache, which is a better problem to have. Now, whether China buys gold, invests in the Tibet hydroelectric dam, or just lends money to Africa, it's money well spent. At the very least, it's not helping to subsidize Washington. But for holders of US bonds, de-dollarization is the clear and present danger. Now, as the world continues to move away from dollar transactions, it really puts the burden on US allies and their friends. China's trade turnover with BRICS countries and partners just reached a new record high. In the first 6 months of the year, trade exceeded $850 billion worth, and that's a growth rate of almost 4%, which is quite remarkable considering we are in the midst of a global trade war. Now, what's even more crazy is how BRICS members and partners account for 28% of Chinese foreign trade. And when this trade goes on, we best believe local currency trade is happening. China will be glad to buy and sell in the RMB or other currencies of the BRICS members. And whether it's the ruble, Indian rupee, or Brazilian real, it's better than throwing their support to the dollar. Now, as the dollarization continues to ramp up, it chips away at dollar hegemony even more. But hey, at least Trump still feels very positive about the dollar, and to him, BRICS is still a joke. Now, I was glad to see he's still on cloud nine.
You have this little group called BRICS. It's fading out fast, but BRICS is, they wanted to try and take over the dollar, the dominance of the dollar, and the standard of the dollar. And I said, anybody that's in the BRICS consortium of nations, we're going to tariff you 10%. And they had a meeting the following day, and almost nobody showed up. They said, leave me alone. They didn't want to be tariffed, did they, Howard? Huh? So it's amazing. No, we're not going to let the dollar slide. If we have a smart president, you're never going to let the dollar slide. If you have a dummy.
But let's get realistic here. The world is slowly moving to the global majority, and this is where the growth engine of tomorrow truly is. Cheap energy from Russia and industrial output from China, these two alone, they are big lures that many countries still need. But if things can't get any worse, well, Trump just ramped up the trade war up a notch. Even I can't believe the madness can still reach new heights. Now, the king of the world has decided that a baseline tariff of 10% is not enough. Oh no, he wants to punish everyone just a little bit more. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop when it comes to buying bullion. Their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first gold purchase, Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Whether it's 1 ounce or 1 kilo, this is the reputable dealer you are looking for. So take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code SEANFOO. Start your gold stacking journey today. Now in the summit, Trump just announced the unthinkable. He's going to bump up the baseline tariff rate on the world to 15%. And for some countries that he hates, it's going to reach a crazy 50%. So whether you have a trade surplus or deficit with the US, everyone is going to get clobbered. Now, firstly, this is outrageous. Suddenly, in less than a week, Trump is wrapping up the trade war yet again, which really raises a big question. Does he expect the world to bow down? What really is the agenda here? For every country to buy 10 Boeing planes each, maybe for the world to collectively invest $1 trillion or more in the US economy? Right now, it's a guessing game, which companies and investors totally hate. Now, sure, this could be the art of the deal, a shock and awe campaign to scare the world into submission, but this game is going to run dry sooner or later. And the most immediate casualty will be US industries themselves. Now, the ISM Manufacturing Employment Index just hit 46.8 in May, and that's the fourth consecutive monthly contraction. As a result, industrial employment has crashed by 82,000 jobs over the last year. Now imagine what will happen if the baseline tariff gets raised to 15%. I mean seriously, how is this going to benefit US manufacturing? All the essential inputs from steel to copper are facing at least a 30% tariff barrier. Costs are going to fly up, putting more pressure on companies, and they will have to pass the pain down to consumers, who will eventually buy less. then we'll activate this flywheel of destruction where more jobs will get lost as a result. Demand destruction, if left unchecked, will result in job losses. It's not very hard to understand. However, perhaps we found what Trump really wants. In an interview, Lutnick just went off the rails. He's either future faking or just telegraphed the punch to us. Apparently, Trump has secured $15 trillion worth of investments into the US from where? Mars and Neptune?
Got this more than 11 trillion, right? More than $15 trillion worth of committed investment to America. And that's going to generate, just building all those factories, it's going to be 1.5% to 2% GDP. And now what people aren't talking about, and they should start talking about, is Donald Trump is smashing open these foreign markets. It starts to pay off our debt. It starts to balance our budget. You take the largest economy in the world and you put it on steroids. This is the Donald Trump economy, and it's coming.
Now, maybe the plan after all is to force industries around the world to move to the US or arm twist countries to sign a deal like Japan. This is basically a shakedown on a global scale. And here's the disturbing part. For many economies that are dependent on US markets, there might not be much choice. They might need to just pony up the money. Now, there are rumors that the South Koreans are thinking of pledging huge sum of money to drop the tariff rate. Korea is facing a 25% tariff, and they could just do a Japan to bring it down to 15% as well. But it could involve hundreds of billions of dollars. It could be anywhere from 100 billion to half a trillion, matching Japan's pledge. And this would drive the Koreans into greater debt. This might be a new angle that Washington is playing. Will shake down the world for cash to drop the tariff rate. And if you take a step back, it looks like a genius move, doesn't it? Not only is the world already subsidizing you through Treasury bonds, now they're helping to build back US industries. And in an interview, Scott Bessent also confirmed this sentiment. He calls it an innovative financing mechanism and is something that the US desperately needs but can't afford to do it themselves. They need the money to invest to build infrastructure, to develop factories, and to basically rehaul the entire United States. But they just can't afford to borrow money to make it happen. The US is already running a deficit that could hit $2 trillion this year. The 10-year yield is near 4.5%, while the 30-year is close to 5%. So borrowing money on the long end will break the economy as a whole. Bessent also can't risk firing Powell today to slam down rates. That would just cause the dollar to go into a tailspin, a collapse that can't be controlled. So now the US is making a really insidious move. And if they can't fund their own economy, they will arm twist the world for money. And should this work on Korea, we can expect Trump to rinse and repeat this strategy on Canada and even Europe. Now the EU, for example, is trying to nail down a 15% tariff deal with Trump, but I'm quite convinced that Bessent will try to bundle in an investment pledge as well. And that would be the ultimate insult to injury, won't it? Europe has already cut themselves away from cheap Russian commodities. They also hit Chinese exports with tariffs during the Biden term. As a result, their industries are in shambles. They are in deep trouble. And if they are forced to finance American projects to bring down the tariff rate, I think this is game over for Europe. It will only get worse from here. And what we have said is coming true. The US is now consolidating the Western Hemisphere by squeezing their allies dry. And sooner or later, this will lead to an economic collision course with BRICS. It's just a matter of time now. This will really be an ugly show when it happens. But let me know what you think. Will China dump all of their US bonds till it hits zero? And why is Trump hiking the baseline tariff to 15% now? Is it all about getting the investment money? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.